Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast.
Hi there, how are you all? I hope you've all had a great week. Welcome to the What Bitcoin Did podcast. This week I have a really interesting interview. I've got another Brit on the show, a chap by the name of Richard Burton, who, if you don't know, is working on a project called balance.io. And this is the first remote interview I've done. Some of you who've listened to the show regularly will know I try and do them all in person, but that's becoming quite restrictive because sometimes I want to have a chat with somebody and they are 4,000 to 5,000 miles away. So I've decided to let that slip if I have to, if I want to talk to a specific person. So this is the first remote one, but I don't think it suffers. I still think it's as good as all the others. I still think the content's great. I hope you'll agree with that. But yeah, it's a great chat. I've been talking to Richard for a while now, actually. We've been conversing on Twitter about various things. And yeah, he stood out to me recently. I saw a video with him, which I will put in the show notes, where he was at Blockchain Beach and he called out the EOS team quite rightly for a number of things. I think we've all had concerns, well, not all of us, but some of us have had concerns with how much they've raised and the way they've shipped their product and some of the issues around that early on. So that was very interesting. I quite like it how he called them out. It was quite ballsy. And yeah, I just wanted to talk to him. I felt like he was somebody I would want to get on. So we talk about a number of things. We talk about protocols. We talk about the Balance project. But quite interestingly, we also talk about the challenges of him building a company. This is his first role as a CEO, and he gets quite passionate at some point. You can definitely tell that it's been challenging and a stressful time for him, and that's, you know, it's really interesting to see. I think anyone who wants to start a business and wants to do a startup needs to understand it. You know, it isn't all rosy. Once you've raised the money, you do actually have to go out there and build something, and that comes with a number of challenges. The backstory is also really interesting, and I will share something he wrote on Medium about that, because I think it's really worth having a read of that and understanding the background to it. Outside of that, personally, I've been heading down the Bitcoin rabbit hole this last week after getting regularly blocked by what some people might call Bitcoin maximalist Bitcoiners. I decided to try and understand what I'm missing with Bitcoin. You know, what in the story of Bitcoin am I missing? Why do I still think there is opportunities with altcoins and tokens and they don't? So I've been down the rabbit hole. I'm working my way through Saifedean Ammous's book, The Bitcoin Standard. I've been working my way through Pierre Ricard's Noded podcast, and it's opening my eyes to things. There's some very compelling arguments for why these guys are only interested in Bitcoin. Sorry, I say these guys, I mean these guys, these girls, why they are only interested in Bitcoin. So I'm going to try and get a few of these Bitcoiners onto the show and explore that a bit and see if there's something we can all learn from that. In other news outside of that, I'm very close to releasing my other podcast. If you've listened before, I've mentioned I'm going to be releasing a more general broad podcast, which will interview people outside of the blockchain space, just more interesting stories. And I've got 2 interviews lined up, one this weekend and one that's going to be next week. And once I have a third, I will get that all uploaded. And, you know, keep an eye out here. I will share it out on social media, and I will share it out on this podcast. And I hope it's something you will all find interesting. And yeah, look forward to getting that out. And lastly, I'm going to give a shout out to a project some of my friends are working on. Obviously, my podcast is an opportunity for people to advertise, but I'm not being paid for this. I'm not getting a referral fee. I just like the fact that these guys are out there building. I regularly talk to them about various issues. It's one guy called Coin Yeezy, at Coin Yeezy, and Crypto Randy Marsh. You might know these guys. It's funny, these names we have out in crypto. But yeah, they're friends. They're doing something cool. So I said, you know what, you can have a spot on my podcast and hopefully raise some exposure to this. So they've got this project called Honey Miner. It's a crypto mining app which works on Windows. They are working on a Mac and Linux version, and it's a profit algo switcher which mines the most profitable coin and pays out in Bitcoin. So if you're interested in mining, or you've got some big GPU farm and you want to work with these guys, and then I recommend you check them out. It's at honeyminer.com, and yeah, it looks a pretty cool thing that they've built there. They are currently working on spec mining and additional coin payouts. They're going to look at ASIC compatibility, which is where I became aware of it because I'm an ASIC miner. So I was talking to Coin Yeezy about this, and yeah, something I think that might be interesting. So there's a bunch of links that I will share out in the show notes if you want to find out more, but you can just go to honeyminer.com. And as I said, I've not been paid for this. I'm not getting a referral fee. There's no affiliate fee. There's nothing in this for me. I'm just doing it because I like the guys. So just thought I would be transparent about that. Okay, lastly, please support the show. Please do go out there and leave me a review on iTunes. It really is helpful. It really does help the show come up in the listings if people are searching for Bitcoin and crypto. Hopefully, you think it deserves a 5-star review. Please follow me on social media. I am on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Steemit, I'm on Medium. Everywhere you look for me, I'm at What Bitcoin Did, and I put out various bits of content. I share out the podcast, and I also respond to anyone if you have any questions. Please do check out my website. That's www.whatbitcoindid.com, and you can check out my blog or my training course or anything else I've got on there. And please share this out with your friends and family on social media, which I do see every time it happens, so I am very grateful. Especially actually recently, a lot of people have been sharing out my interview with Lynn Ulbrich, which is it's a very important interview for a number of reasons, both personally but also for the family. So I do appreciate that. It means a lot. Okay, so let's move on to the interview with Richard. I hope you enjoyed as much as I do. He is a very cool guy. I do recommend you follow him on social media. He puts out a bunch of interesting stuff, and it's a real insight into the project, but also the challenges of running a startup. So I recommend you following him. And if you've got any questions, do feel free to email me. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com, and I will pretty much get back to anyone. So hopefully you enjoy this show, and I will see you all next week. Richard, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. Currently in one of the balance hammocks, living the dream.
I've noticed that. So I can't even remember when we first got in touch or how it was, but you definitely stood out most recently with that EOS video. What was the background to that? What happened there?
Yeah, I was in Los Angeles to visit some friends and also to see Taylor from My Crypto, who's one of my favorite people in the space. She was heading to this event called Blockchain on the Beach. And went along, just thought it'd be an interesting event to check out and see what the LA's crypto scene was like. I was queuing for the bathroom, and someone pushed in front of me, pushed in front of the entire queue, and then kind of sweeped out saying, "Oh, I have to be on a panel." And I just thought, well, that guy's a massive douche. And then for the next kind of 45 minutes, him and 3 other people on that panel just talked about EOS as if it was the second coming of Christ. And no one was kind of pushing back. And I was just increasingly irritated by what they were saying. And then they invited questions at the end. I thought, well, this is my opportunity. Because I've disliked the EOS project for quite some time, a good kind of 4 or 5 months. And or even longer, in fact. And anyway, I went and, just asked them some questions. And you can see by the kind of incredibly lacking quality of their answers that these are people who really do not believe what they're saying. They believe it because they've made money, not because they actually agree with the way the project's run. And I think that for many people, that video was quite cathartic because for 2 reasons. Is that a lot of people in many different crypto projects, from Bitcoin to Ethereum, agree that EOS has gone way too far. And they couldn't go anywhere. They had to stay there on the podium, and they couldn't walk away. And it's one thing to kind of send tweets to people. It's an absolutely different thing to debate it in person and look them in the square of the eye. So I guess that was really the context that I came into it. And I just tried to ask them some very simple questions about the sheer amount of capital they've raised and the sheer lack of software that's actually running. And the unbelievably kind of opaque and mysterious way in which this capital has been ingested and deployed. Kind of did a few rounds on a few different social media platforms, and then I started getting loads of password reset emails and requests and all kinds of things. So it's been somewhat intimidating to have my entire online presence poked away at. But that seems to have settled down for now. But we'll see what happens.
So outside of the money issue, obviously there's a lot of questions around that. They've raised, 4 billion. But outside of that, just with the product alone, you as a product developer, product designer, what are your primary issues that you have with EOS?
Well, I think that the notion of a protocol that has 21 data centers to which you delegate priority to run smart contracts, which is essentially what EOS is. It's kind of like a distributed Amazon. I think that's a really interesting experiment. So as a protocol level, I'm very excited about it. But no one's explained to me why you need 4 billion to run that experiment. So I'm actually not against the idea of dragging the dial between decentralization and speed and making a set of trade-offs that are quite interesting. if it comes from a kind of competent, ethical team who really want to kind of present this as somewhere between Ethereum and AWS. I think that's a very interesting idea. And as a product designer, I think that perhaps we would interact with such a protocol if it was run by people that had any moral backbone whatsoever. So it's actually have no issue with the kind of sets of trade-offs they're experimenting with. It's really absolutely everything about the way in which they've executed those sets of trade-offs, which just strikes me as irksome, weird, and just morally bankrupt.
Yeah, Kyle Samani talks about it, and he said there's essentially, like you said, there's a line, right, between decentralization and speed. And obviously we've noticed with a number of the leading protocols out there that scaling has become an issue. And if these blockchains are going to be used for something which traditional businesses might use, they're going to probably accept the decentralization trade-off for better scaling. Yet you have fundamental issues with actually what they've shipped by now.
Or just how little they've shipped, how opaque they've been with the community, how just the enormous amount of capital they've raised. And I think Carl's a brilliant investor and a fantastic thinker and writer. But I think that he obsesses over the theory and the code without thinking about the people. One of the benefits I have is I'm not intelligent enough to understand the maths or the kind of in-depth engineering of mechanism design. And so I really approach this from the outside in instead of the inside out. And from the outside, absolutely everything looks terrible about EOS. Just their website, the way they communicate, the fact they don't have a wallet, there was no voting user interface. Their branding, the fact they did advertisements in Times Square, the parties, the Puerto Rico kind of system that they got, Brock Pierce, Dan Larimer's way in which he interacts with people online. It just goes on and on and on, the list of just terrible things that indicate that these are not fantastic converters of capital into code. And I don't want to support people like that. From the very beginning, at every project I've been involved in my short career, the things that have gone the best are the ones where the people had a strong moral backbone and were extremely good at executing. And those are the people that I like to kind of partner with, because that's something I can understand. I can't understand the latest theory and protocol design. I'm not smart enough, but I can get a read on people quite quickly. And that's where I begin my research, is the people, because it's the people who make the protocol.
Yeah, so the money never bothered me at first, because when I made an investment in EOS quite a long time ago. It was like 50 cents or something. Not really knowing or understanding what I'm investing in, just as one of those crypto people who tends to spread his investments as they grow quite wide. But I took a look at it. I thought, okay, it's another protocol, something that was to challenge Ethereum. But I am not of a competence level where I can understand the tech. So I made the investment not understanding how much they were going to raise. So obviously it was a huge raise, and I think if it had been a successful launch, then maybe it wouldn't have garnered such attention. But what was really interesting this week were the tweets that I saw from Meltem about it. Did you see these?
Yeah, she's great. But Meltem, for people who don't know, is had a huge amount of experience in the industry. And she's conscious that many projects have way too much capital and need to manage their treasuries correctly. And she knows all about that. So she's kind of helping a lot of projects who have way too much money and are freaking out manage that capital correctly. And she kind of really called out the EOS capital stack there, which is great.
Yeah, so what was really interesting about that was that they are then reinvesting that money into other funds. And with your investment in EOS, you don't legally have right to anything. So essentially, they've printed $4 billion off investors for something you don't have a right for, and they are therefore then able to invest that in other funds to grow Block One, which has nothing to do with EOS really at that point. And in my mind, I would have assumed that everything I'd invested into the EOS token would then at least be reinvested into the EOS product or infrastructure.
Well, no, Dan Larimer literally said on a podcast last year, which I tweeted out, where he said, we have no obligation to continue working on the EOS software. This is not sold as a security. We count this as revenue into Block One. And we're running all of that money through the Caymans. He said this on the Epicenter podcast. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is just him plainly stating what his lawyers have asked him to suggest. And that put me off last year. I thought that sounds a bit weird. And then it just got weirder and weirder the more I kind of interacted with the team, and then the more I found out about what the people are like who actually run it.
So what is the actual use case then for EOS? Like, if you as a developer or product builder, and what's the scenario that you would actually use EOS?
Well, I think if you would like to create CryptoKitties but have it run much more quickly, you could run it on EOS. But in theory, I mean, right now it doesn't even function. The block producers are kind of falling over each other and kind of coordinating on Skype, which is about as far from the decentralized future as we could possibly be. And quite frankly, it's a very immature development environment with really bad tooling, which obviously will improve with the sheer amount of capital they've got. But if you want a dApp to run faster and you don't care about it being switched off, then just put it on Amazon and don't call it a dApp. Just call it an application. So it kind of occupies this gray area between Amazon, which is super fast and centralized, and Ethereum, which is super slow and decentralized. And that gray area is an interesting area to experiment with small amounts of capital, not with billions of dollars. It's just psycho.
So it's quite funny because I read one of your articles before we started, and I'm going to quote you from it. It was based when you were
I don't know whether any of it's quote worthy at all.
No, it's good. So it actually relates to this quite interestingly, because it's when you're in the Hacker House and you went to a talk with the CTO of the Ethereum Foundation, Gavin Wood, and you said
there wasn't even a foundation at that point. It was just
wasn't.
A bunch of ragtag nutters just saying Ethereum was a thing.
Well, you in your quote, he said he spoke about the goals of the project and how they wanted to build a blockchain supercomputer which could run programs which couldn't be stopped.
Yeah. And that's actually a really great way, I think, to describe these blockchains. Everyone talks about decentralization, but for the regular folks, they don't understand what that means. But every time I've said you can write unstoppable software, that kind of like makes people feel strange. They're like, what do you mean unstoppable? Like, no, it just cannot be stopped. I mean, there is now no government or company or person or project or anything that can like stop Ethereum or bring it totally to its knees. They can certainly slow it down, as they proved in the last weekend, but unstoppable software has some very interesting properties. And that, I think, is why Ethereum is this expensive, trustworthy world computer for unstoppable software. And I think that's great.
But whereas EOS could be stopped?
EOS, I mean, so the way it works, I believe, I mean, a high-level understanding is that people wish to become block producers or they wish to run these kind of large data centers on which EOS-based dApps will run. And let's say that there's a bunch of these data centers, just like Amazon or Google, and the market cap of EOS and all the applications running on top of it is several trillion. At a certain point, it makes sense to just send a bunch of guys in with grenades and blow the data centers up and short the whole market. So the level of decentralization there is very limited. So you've kind of got this really narrow set of trade-offs, which again is super interesting if you're going to burn, say, $50 to $100 million. But when you get into the billions without actually shipping anything, it's absolutely mental.
So I try and understand, like myself, as somebody who might invest in this or talks to other people who might invest in this. Therefore, what is the point? What is that middle ground between a fully decentralized Ethereum and then a fully centralized AWS? What is the benefit of this middle ground, which isn't as fast as... So essentially, you don't get the benefits of...
I honestly think that it's very hard to understand these things beforehand. I mean, we didn't know that the killer dApp for Ethereum would be the token, right? No one anticipated that, really. I mean, obviously, I did a bunch of mock-ups where it was like gold coin and other kind of tokens on top of Ethereum, in the couple of months that I helped out for a little bit. But nobody knew that tokens were going to take off like this. So you can never really know what the emergent killer dApp for a protocol is. And I mean, everyone thought that Bitcoin would be useful for payments, and it's turned out to be, great as a store of value. And some people believed that the whole time, but others didn't. And so it's great to run these experiments. It's great to see what emerges. But when the kind of founding principles of the project are just so morally questionable, and the people involved are all just terrible human beings, as far as I can tell from a bit of light Googling and, just some of the evidence I've dug up. And when, our entire industry is willing to invite people like Brock Pierce to prognosticate on the blockchain, I mean, it just drives me nuts. Like this guy, you only need to Google for 5 minutes to know that this person has had a very dark history. And he is like the Harvey Weinstein of our industry. He really is awful. John Oliver took more courage calling him out than anyone I ever know in our industry. And that's one of the advisors. And note that people only parted ways with him when John Oliver actually called him out in public. So it's just a total shitfest of this kind of EOS, Tether, Bitfinex, like circling of money in this crazy dark vortex of shit. And we should call it out for what it is, which is a massive scam, which a lot of people are going to lose a load of money. And I think that the more vocal we are about that, the more evidence we'll have to point back to people and say, look, we told you. At the end of the day, you need to focus on the original founding principles and the people of a protocol. And then where all the mistakes are made. And Ethereum is by no means a paragon of virtue. But I can tell you, from personal experience, that Vitalik means well. And I think that's very different to the founding team of EOS.
Can I tell you an interesting fact about John Oliver?
Sure.
He's from Bedford. He is from Bedford, where I live. Out here, really? This funny little town. He is. Okay, so if we move beyond the bullshit of EOS, but imagine there's another protocol that's going to arrive that is of a similar middle-of-the-road centralization. So technology-wise, I'm trying to, again, imagine if you don't get the benefits of decentralization that you have with Ethereum, and you don't get the benefits of the speed of Amazon, I'm trying to understand the middle ground, why it exists. And the only scenario I can imagine you would want something which is on a blockchain, which isn't decentralized and isn't as fast as Amazon, is because it allows you to plug into the crypto infrastructure. So it allows you to because once you're part of the crypto infrastructure, you can buy and trade coins one for the other. So with EOS, you can buy EOS with Ethereum. So you're part of that network of tokens. If you go onto Amazon, you're not really part of that network of tokens.
Well, first of all, there's a whole set of things that Amazon doesn't allow to run on their web servers. So, there are a bunch of different projects that they just deem it unethical or they decide they want to shut down. Second of all, there are times you can imagine in the future where Amazon may be requested to shut off certain pieces of software depending on where they're at, and so having some kind of middle ground could be super valuable. A good example, people who experience censorship of their software and payments all the time is the porn industry, and that's why you see things like SpankChain coming out, where cam girls wish to kind of perform online and earn money, and web service companies and banks aren't willing to help them. So we'll put aside your kind of moral arguments about whether those projects are good or not. The censorship does occur even in the most economically developed countries. And so that's just like one example I can think of. But I'm not going to really purport to be an expert on understanding what kinds of things might emerge as this set of trade-offs go left and right. You're asking a question I know I don't know the answer to, so I'm going to be honest about that. But we can always talk from first principles about what great software projects have as the kind of nourishing initial ingredients. And usually it's very interesting people who work incredibly hard, who have strong principles and ideas about the future. And that is not something that can be said from the EOS team.
So interestingly, usually I start an interview with a bit of an origin story. But I've got to the origin of how I got to know you. I actually think it's before we go back to protocols, because I do have more questions for you, I think it was probably good also to just let people know a bit about your story. Because actually, I was reading a bit about you living in a hacker house in San Francisco. You were running out of money. You were living on credit cards. You did a bit of work. And then you got a random email telling you would be paid in ETH. And then the bull market changed everything.
Yeah, there's quite a few aspects to that.
The whole story is worth telling.
Yeah, sure. In brief, I stumbled into a project called Stripe for a few months, which is where I met my business partner, Christian. And Stripe, if you don't know, is a payments company which was growing incredibly fast in San Francisco. Previously, I'd sold some clothing online, so I had some experience of how hard it is to integrate a payment system. And joining Stripe really changed my life because just for a few months, I got to see inside a company that was growing exponentially. It was just basically growing like that. And after that, you kind of have this bar for what's possible. And also, looking back, I kind of have this mental model of what a really great founder looks like. because Patrick and John from Stripe are just truly next level people. I like to call them aliens because they are just operating on different frequencies. And so after Stripe, I wanted to learn how to make things and write software, and I was traveling and teaching myself to code and doing different things. And I kept investing in crazy stuff. And one of the projects I invested in was a recruiting website called sourcing.io. I put all of my time and personal capital into that to help a friend, and we got that to break even. And unfortunately, we parted ways and weren't working together anymore. But I was basically flat broke, and I was running around San Francisco and heard Vitalik come on a podcast, which is amazing. Like listening to him talking about building a blockchain computer, it sounded really fascinating, although I couldn't quite fathom what he was talking about. But then it just so happened that the hacker house I was staying at, Gavin Wood was there giving a talk, and I hung out with him a little bit in California, wandered around with the whole ragtag Ethereum crew in around Silicon Valley. And then when I got back to Britain and went to London, crashed on a friend's couch, and I met up with Gavin a couple of times and just iterated on loads of designs for what Ethereum might look like for people to use. And I made a dApp store, a Whisper monitor, a wallet, a bunch of network monitoring tools, a whole set of things that people might use for Ethereum. And then literally just the credit card debt got too much. So I went back to freelancing and started paying off all that debt, and kind of just left the Ethereum community until the pre-sale came along. And I was like, oh, great. They managed to actually get the sale going, and chucked in a little bit of money. And then honestly just forgot about Ethereum for a couple of years. And then Ethan Wilding, who's a goddamn saint who'd stuck with it the whole time, got in touch and said, hey, we owe you some Ethereum. And I was like, I didn't even think about it. And then a few months later, Vitalik paid me, and I just couldn't believe it. It was just like a whole different level. But I mean, it kind of, I went from, I feel like, being in massive debt to the banks. Well, not massive, I was paying down a lot of it, and it was nearly done. And some of the investments I was making started to pay off. But I went from kind of being in debt for the banks to being in debt to, I think, the Ethereum protocol and the team behind it, and all the people who put in the hard work for the years whilst I wasn't there. And kind of last year, when the mega bull run hit, I was like, right, I've got to see what the hell's going on here. I mean, this is just bonkers, and I want to see if I can help. And that's what I've been trying to do for the last year, together with my business partner Christian and the team we have here at Balance.
At what level did you first sell a bit of Ethereum? Because as the price went up, it was always tempting.
Dude, when I first got it, I sold a bunch for like $9 because I was like, this is crazy. It's gone from 30 cents to $9. I've made a huge return.
That might have been me, actually. When I first got in, it was $9.
Yeah. I hope it's yours, man. I'm glad you had it. And it seemed like crazy when it went to $9. Yeah. So I mean, ever since then, it's been bananas. But I have to say, the major thing I've invested in since is just trying to keep Balance alive. So the VAR. Yeah,
I was going to say. So from there, you obviously that kind of reignited your interest back into it.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say that people get interested for the prices and they stick around for the values.
Yeah.
If you're only here to trade, most people fuck off the minute they lose a load of money.
Yeah. So you came back in and you realised you wanted to do work building something. Mm-hmm. Was Balance the first project you started on?
Well, so we Balance was like a personal finance Mac app that me and Christian and a friend of ours were working on as a side project. And it just so happened that Christian was living with the mastermind of the Filecoin sale. And this chap invited us out to the Caribbean to go and meet the Filecoin team. And we were thinking about helping them. And after a week, two things were kind of set in my mind is that 2017 is going to be nuts. And the protocol and developers really undervalue product design. And so with those two things in mind, we kind of set about starting refocusing the company from personal finance tools for banks to products for protocols.
Okay.
And it's been a kind of year-long reorientation, which has been extremely painful because it's really hard to make great software that people actually like. We've made a load of beautiful things that no one uses. And finally, we've shipped something that people actually like.
Okay, so let's go through that. So,
sure.
What was the first original idea? Because there are a whole suite of things you can do with Balance. I've seen like the long-term roadmap. I've seen the kind of suite of products that you want to create interfaces for. But what was the original spark? What was the idea you guys came to?
The spark The spark was just I went to interview at a company called Plaid, which is a really cool project, and they do banking data. And we spent a year and a half building a personal finance Mac app that sits in the top right of your Mac as a fun side project. And we launched this thing, and then Plaid's data provider, Intuit, pulled all the data and wrecked our app. So just destroyed it. So a year and a half my ether, a hell of a lot of time and effort went into building a personal finance tool that's basically unusable. So that was great. And then the bull run came, and I was like, "Oh, fantastic! Well, let's actually dive back into Ethereum." And then we made a bunch of Mac apps for different exchanges, and an iPhone app, and all this stuff. It's just absolutely shit. And then in December we started kind of experimenting with a web app. And in February we made a huge shift in the company. We went from writing Swift Mac apps to writing React web apps. We went from doing things closed source to open source. We went from a team of distributed, 10 people across the world to kind of 3 or 4 people in one place. We went from, talking about our products at the end of the product cycle to me kind of raving about them on Twitter beforehand to get feedback and constantly iterating. So it was an incredibly painful shift for the company. But now what we've settled on is a set of user interfaces, initially for Ethereum and then other protocols we believe in, which together will make up an open source bank. And that's really Balance's goal, is to build a fully open source bank. So you can do everything you can do with a normal bank, but do it with Balance.
How does somebody like me get my head around an open source bank, in that I can look at your wallet and I can get my head around, okay, there's a wallet here, but this is a wallet for holding crypto tokens. When you say an open source bank, is this mean you're building technology that anyone else can build upon? Or are you building a suite that sits within Balance?
I'm not sure I'd use any of those words to describe it. So you've set up a false dichotomy there.
Right, okay.
Here's the bottom line is by the end of this year, you will be able to go into our products on the phone and the web. You'll be able to get a loan. You'll be able to exchange any kind of token. You'll be able to store your money in stable tokens like DAI. You'll be able to exchange assets from Bitcoin to Ethereum. And you'll be able to do basically any of the kind of economic functions that are available on Ethereum as a set of smart contracts that we really like. So we love the Dharma protocol for lending, the 0x protocol for exchanging assets, and things like DYDX for derivatives. And so if you think about that, and obviously DAI as the stable coin, if you think about that, we just recreated every major function of a bank, not ourselves, but by using the sets of smart contracts that exist on Ethereum that come from other teams. And so if we zoom out and look at all the banks in the world, they all write a ledger, they all write sending, they all write receiving, they all write exchanging, they all write lending. And now you don't need to do that anymore, because right now we have common economic infrastructure that exists on Ethereum that today is super slow, super hard to use, and basically won't benefit anyone. But that will change very quickly. And the first product that I think is going to have a meaningful impact is doing student loans for programming courses entirely on Ethereum. And you can view them and manage them in Balance.
So that sounds really interesting, but can you explain that as a user experience? If somebody wants a loan, and imagine they're non-crypto, imagine they've had no exposure to crypto, what would their experience be of then going to take a loan?
So you would get an email saying, "Hey, you're accepted to this student loans course." This student programming course.
Okay.
It's a 3-month course, and by the way, you can get $5,000 of super low interest debt from our partner Balance. And they click on that link, they go to Balance, and they've got $5,000 of DAI. And they go, "What the fuck is DAI?" And then they have to learn about DAI, and they can convert that to dollars, which will with one of our partners who's going to do a DAI to dollar exchange. And then they'll start to go, "Wait, where did this loan come from? Why are they lending it to me? And how does it function?" And so the beauty of this is that we're going to give money to people denominated in DAI, so it's crypto-based loan, and then they have to themselves go and convert it into dollars. And so we will teach people about crypto by kind of inviting them in with a very, very low interest loan. And I think that's a very good hook. And the reason why I want to do programming courses or kind of design courses is I think there's a massive student loan bubble where people are spending way too much on way too useless courses. And I've helped a few people through some programming courses, and it changes their life. I mean, it changed my life doing a programming course. Not that I'm necessarily a great engineer, but it helped me in 3 months completely level up.
So I'm going to just focus in on that. So,
sure.
So they've received their loan. How do they? So they access it on a mobile app, on a web browser. They can view it.
Either.
And it's denominated in dime. That's make a die. Yeah,
That's right.
If they want to withdraw that to their bank account, so they can use the money, is that what it is, or is the loan paying for the course?
The loan is up. They can spend it however they want. But the bottom line is, we know that they are going to be 3 months doing an intense programming course, and that this course will have said these are our lowest economically kind of secure students. So we're certainly not going to help people who are getting, mummy and daddy paying for the whole thing. It's more like for every one of these courses has a band of students who couldn't do it if they couldn't access finance.
Right.
And so we're going to help those people.
Okay, so there will be some method of transferring it, that converting it to dollar, pound, whatever, and back into their bank account.
And we've got a partnership we'll be announcing. We can't announce it yet. We'd like to be open about it, but they're not able to discuss it yet.
And I guess,
essentially, these are people who are opting into a programming course who are going to learn about programmatic money. I mean, it's the perfect time, right?
Right, and they can withdraw $20 or the whole amount in one go.
They can do whatever they want. They can take the $5,000 out and they can spend it and never pay it back. But this is going to be an alumni smart contract. So when you pay it back, the vast majority of the capital will be given then to future students of that school.
Okay, that's cool. And DAI is a stable coin. Is it DAO or DAI?
It's DAI, DAI, so dollar or DAI, and its maker is the governance token for that project. And it's an amazing set of smart contracts.
What does it state? What is it pegged to? Is it pegged to the dollar?
Yeah, it's a peg coin to the dollar.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and is there an interest on this loan?
Yeah, we haven't decided that yet. What that will be. The goal will be just to make the system economically viable, and it'll be an experiment. We'll just start with say a few $100,000 of loans and kick the flywheel go off.
I guess this is like an interesting concept in that we have loans from banks traditionally. How do loans scale in a crypto world where we don't always know who we're lending to? Will there always be a KYC process of before they can receive the loan of identity? Is that something you're planning for?
So I believe that because you're reducing the cost, because more people can start and create and issue debt on Dharma, which runs on Ethereum, we're going to just see a massive set of experiments. So Bloom is creating a credit score network on Ethereum. And so you can imagine for kind of sizable loans of hundreds of thousands of dollars, you will need KYC and kind of things like that. But imagine that you also participate in some kind of microfinance event in a kind of country in some of these less economically developed regions. And then you kind of get $10 of microcredit, you pay it back, and you build some kind of credit score anonymously. And then you want that Ethereum address never to have a dipped credit score because you want to keep borrowing more and more money to improve your life. So that's one area. We're also talking about pawning CryptoKitties, which could be fascinating. And another thing is staking, kind of the ability to kind of stake your existing tokens to borrow different kinds. We're going to see just an unbelievable Cambrian explosion of experimentation around debt. And in my opinion, that when the kind of ability to issue debt is commoditized, the only thing people will trust is brand and customer service. And that's what Balance plans to deliver, is a fantastic way to get sensible loans out that exist on top of open source software. And you can take those loans to any other wallet, or you can take them to any other service provider. And so the only reason why you would use Balance as your originator and pay us the interest and continue to pay off our initial capital expenditure is because we give great customer service. And so in the same way that Microsoft has a monopoly on its software, and so its customer support is dog shit, whereas Linux is this kind of horizontal ecosystem where every company competes based on user experience and customer support. We think the exact same thing's about to happen to the banking system that just happened to the operating system, where when everything's open source, what do people kind of they stick to? They stick to community, they stick to brand, and they stick to customer support. And those are the things that we're spending an awful lot of time on focusing on at Balance.
So is Balance a software company or a future bank, quote unquote?
Well, I think we're an attempt at creating an open source bank. I don't think that regular people on the street are going to kind of gravitate towards an open source bank because it's open source. I think they'll gravitate towards it because it's better. And I believe that we should be able to do something better because it's open source. In the same way that Linux won and Windows made a bit of money, in the long term, Linux cajoled Windows over the head with its free open source software. And eventually, the only reason Microsoft has returned to growth as a company is they've said, we are an open source running company.
Right.
And that is why that Satya Nadella is an incredible CEO, as he recognized they made a mistake in the long term.
So if that's the journey you're on and that's the path you're going down, does that mean there are certain regulatory things you have to do? Do you have to register for a banking license? Is that something you have to do?
I think if we interact with the USD or GBP or EUR protocol, we absolutely will have to. And that's something I'm definitely willing to explore further down the line. But right now I'm focused, and we are all focused as a team, on the ETH protocol, which is permissionless and currently doesn't have any meaningful regulation whatsoever.
Right.
So as and when the regulation comes in, we'll definitely pay attention to it. But as so far, no government has made any meaningful regulations over the Ethereum protocol. So it's not something I'm going to focus on right now, but very happy to abide by all laws and regulations as and when they come in. But the problem is it's an unstoppable protocol that cannot really be kind of affected by government. So I don't know how they're going to regulate over it.
Okay, that sounds cool. So at the moment, though, your products, you do have a wallet out there, right?
No, we don't.
Oh,
what we have is we have a manager.
What's the difference between a manager and a wallet? I thought
a manager manages wallets. A wallet actually has private keys. So Manager is a tool to interact with your wallets. We have so it interacts with MetaMask, Trezor, and Ledger, and it allows you to view your Ethereum and your Ethereum-based tokens.
So it's like a
relatively limited in scope.
So it's like a beautiful interface. Is that similar to then? Is MyEther wallet considered a manager?
That's what we described it as. So MyEther wallet became quite confusing to people because they didn't understand the difference between like a wallet, which actually has a private keys, and a thing that actually interacts with it, and like how these different products work. And my crypto, it just spun off of MyEther wallet and is doing much better work than the MyEther wallet team. It's just done a much better job of kind of articulating that my crypto is a user interface to Ethereum, which interacts with your private keys and the Ethereum protocol and brings it together in a kind of a useful user experience. And that's why we call Balance Manager. It's for managing a wallet. But we are working on a wallet for iOS right now, which is coming along really nicely.
Does your manager work also? Does it work with Ledger and Trezor and the hardware?
It works with Ledger. Yeah, it works with Ledger, Trezor, and MetaMask.
So where do you consider yourself when you compare yourself? Like I've looked at MyEther wallet and my crypto, and I've looked at yours, and what it looks like. I just can't stand MyEther wallet. I think it's ugly, just horrible to use. And my crypto was similar to begin with. They've done a lot more work on UX. It looks like you're setting your UX as your USP. First of all, I kind of won't hear much criticism for any of the projects that got us from 0 to 1. Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are people who there was nothing and then something existed. And then a huge part of Ethereum's value was derived by MyEther wallet existing. And I think an enormous amount of value was derived from MetaMask existing. So I hear a lot of people criticizing these projects without any appreciation for just how hard these people worked to manage the ICO boom last year. When I hear companies saying, we're waiting on MetaMask to add this feature, I'm like, well, you've got $100 million. Why don't you hire a MetaMask engineer, someone to work on the project full time? It's open source code. Why don't you help them instead of moaning? So I think the MetaMask and my crypto team have done an amazing job of building Swiss Army knives for Ethereum that can do loads and loads of things. Like, if you log into my crypto, it's amazing the amount of things you can do. You can register ENS domains, you can submit to contracts, you can do all kinds of bytecode initialization. You can do things on your desktop with your private keys. You can do air gap stuff. I mean, you can import your JSON wallet. There's like so many advanced tools in there that I view as like this Swiss Army knife. What we felt was missing is not a suggestion that their better usability can't be done. It's that just by focusing on a couple of features, the ability to send and the ability to receive and the ability to kind of view your tokens, that would be of some value. And that's really what Balance is it's focusing on managing your token balances and exchanging them and sending them. And that's it.
I mean, I think you've done a great job there of being respectful to everyone who's come before you. that isn't something I've had to experience or understand or care for. What I can see is that balance seems to me to be a more consumer-ready product. And when so if I'm always trying to think of when I go out on a Friday night with my friends who are, doing traditional jobs, traditional markets, what is the bridge? How do we bridge the gap from crypto to them, it being part of their lives? And we're a long way from that. Even the ones who have bought a little bit of Bitcoin because they've heard about it from me, and say they bought a token, say they figured out how to find a token. If you put them in front of my Ether wallet, they are not going to know what to do.
Yeah. Well, that's because you need to give up talking to people in England and you need to go to Argentina. You need to stop talking to people older than you and go start talking to kids. You need, I've given up on, I will not waste one iota of energy on anyone who's grown up in a strong financial country or never experienced debt. Because that's what I had, is I got to experience crippling credit card debt. So I got to see the tricks that these banks did when I tried to even just pay off my credit cards. It's crazy. I actually recently logged in and just tried to pay off an entire credit card and it wouldn't let me. So I'm actually screenshotted all of the user interface and I've decided, you know what, I'm never going to pay you back until you fix this design. And so that's going to be one of the little posts that I stand on. I don't care about my credit rating on the GBP protocol. You can do one. So I don't spend any energy trying to talk to these people who've never actually been persecuted by the financial system. And so if you're going to try and convince your mates down the pub, it's not going to work. If you go to countries that actually have suffered from men continually printing money and men continually setting up incentives incorrectly like they do at most banks, then we're going to have a conversation. And that's why I don't care about people who don't agree that Bitcoin's a good idea. I care about students who are terrified of potentially going into massive amounts of debt to go into university, who could go and do a programming course for 3 months and change their lives. Those are the people I focus on. And by focusing down on those people, I've saved myself a whole lot of heartache and headache, because those are the people who eventually will grow up as crypto natives, and all the rest of these people are just going to die, and that's fine.
Well, that's quite interesting then, actually, because funny enough, I'm talking about what I think is the USP that you guys have is just a beautiful experience as a product.
Yeah.
But actually for
It's for advanced users still. It's I mean, if you're trading tokens and moving them around Ethereum wallets, this is the kind of premium Model S product, and we want to, deliver something that's middle of the range with the wallet. But then our plan is to do user interfaces that everyone can benefit from, whether you've got a tiny Android phone or something more advanced. So we absolutely, our goal is to make this thing accessible and useful to regular people. So
what have been your biggest challenges to get into where you are now, and what are the future challenges you're facing? You said you alluded to them earlier, that you had trouble creating things that people wanted to use. What's your challenges?
Yeah. Well, my biggest challenge is I'm a shit CEO because I've only been doing this for about a year. And so by definition, I'm a junior manager. I have no idea what I'm doing. I get loads of people commenting on me all the time, and I get pretty pissed off with them. Hiring and firing, or not even firing, just hiring and having to part way with friends. We haven't fired anyone because no one's done a bad job. It's just we've completely shifted the direction of the company. That's been incredibly painful. Realizing that just because you punted into Ethereum early doesn't mean you're any good at anything whatsoever. Coming to terms with that as a reality of looking yourself in the mirror, that's bloody painful psychologically. And running a startup is, quite frankly, I think the only thing that's more stressful is being a soldier or a fireman, because you actually put your life on the line. The only thing I won't do for balance is die for it.
You said running a startup's trying to get out of a plane which is about to crash. Well, I've got it. Quote
no, I'm not trying to get out. I'm trying to fucking write it. It's like the beginning of GoldenEye.
Oh yeah,
you've seen that movie.
Yeah.
Where he sends the plane off the cliff and he jumps after it, the motorbike, and then you get into the plane and try and kind of pull the stick back. And I would say, well, the only thing Balance has managed to achieve is pull ourselves out of terminal decline, and we're starting to kind of head up. But Christ alive, I don't recommend anyone start a company unless they're really up for it, because it's bloody psychologically painful and it's exhausting, and you have to be kind of relentless in a way that I didn't really realize until you actually really try and do it. Because I've always done little kind of self-funded, instantly profitable little side projects, that is totally different to raising $1.4 million at a 10 million valuation, genuinely looking people in the face and saying, I can deliver you a $50 to $100 million company at a minimum. I mean, that's just a whole different kettle of fish. So that's the struggle. It's the struggle of every founder of actually I'm shit and I've got to get better. So yeah.
Okay, so because this is the first time you've really done this, right?
Well, it's the first time I've raised outside capital for a company. Everything else, I put my own money at risk, and that's been it.
So you're feeling the pressure of what, delivery of the product or delivery of a return or just everything?
For 7 months after we raised money, we were doing a shit job. We really were. We were making crap products, and that was for several reasons. And that's not a nice feeling. You can see I spent about 4 or 5 months off Twitter because it was a combination of a breakup, token depression, where I just thought this whole industry is a load of dog shit, and then not even using our own products. I thought it was crap. So, that's just the reality of it, is I really did not like what was happening in the industry, did not like what was happening in my personal life, and didn't like the products we were making. So that doesn't make for a fun 6 months. So I made an absolute fortune selling ETH at $1,400 or whatever, where I just couldn't believe that these people are actually buying it off me at this price. It didn't make me happy at all. If ever, once you've got the basics covered, Christ, I'll just be honest, it's not easy. It's not easy running a company at all. And I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for all of the founders I know. And honestly, I think only a founder can know, actually. I have more respect now for people who've sold a bloody glass of lemonade than anyone who's just had a job their entire life, if they're going to comment on what we're doing. And that's something I think very strongly, is that until you actually start something yourself, you can't really know what it's like. It's kind of like, you don't take advice on how to make love from a virgin. And I think the same is true of starting companies and starting new projects, is that if someone's had a job their whole life, it's like they're silent when they're giving me advice. I just can't listen to it.
So where are you now? So you're obviously in a better place now. You said you've turned it back a bit. What's changed then? What's happened? What have you learned along the way, or what's happened with the product that makes you a little bit happier and a little bit more confident?
Oh, I'm loads happier. Like, the first thing is like, first of all, we all really believe in what we're doing. Second of all, customers absolutely love it. Third of all, it's open source, so we're getting really good support from the community on how we're building it out. Fourth, we've got a clear plan for what we're going to ship. And fifth, even if the whole project failed and I had to sit opposite the 1,600 people who invested money in this company, I would very happily say I absolutely tried my goddamn best, and I could not have done anything more. And that's a good feeling. It's very liberating to know that, because the chances of us building a successful open source bank are, from outside, infinitesimally small. From inside my head, it's damn certain we're going to do it. But there is a reality that most startups fail. And if this failed, I could very happily say to all of the people that invested in us that no one tried harder to make this thing work. And that's a great feeling. It really is the most liberating feeling, because I go forward just fighting instead of kind of agonizing over every dollar spent. That's good.
So your current status now is you have your manager out?
Yeah, Balance Manager is out, and it's growing nicely, and we're getting thousands of users. We don't track them, so we can just know the number of people who are entering our marketing website. But we're currently thinking very carefully about what things we want to track, because we really want to make sure that we don't have any data that any government agency could ask for.
Right. That's an interesting separate thing to talk about. Why is that?
Sure. Well, because that's the principle of crypto, is that people should be able to tell their government what they would like. They shouldn't be surveilled. And so we shy away from adding any tool. We're quite happy to add Google Analytics to the marketing page as people kind of come in. But at the point at which you're kind of associating your MetaMask address with our product, we need to be super careful about what code we allow in terms of tracking and things like that. And we just haven't had the mental bandwidth to think about that really carefully. And so we're not actually tracking any usage of Manager right now. It's something we're thinking really carefully about before we introduce that.
Right. Okay. So what is coming next then? If the Manager's going well, what is the next product you're looking at? Do you have an exchange as well? I've seen an exchange on your website. Is that an exchange?
Yeah, right now that's just a basic Shapeshift integration. So if you want to kind of exchange Ether for any Ethereum-based token that Shapeshift offer, you can do that. Mm-hmm. We spend an incredible amount of time thinking about that interface and trying to get that right. I think that nearly all exchanges are designed terribly and very confusing. So we just try to present the token that you've got, the token that you'd like, the price for that in the native currency that you operate in, the price that you'll get, the fees that are associated with that, the minimum, the maximum trade, the likely kind of price outcome. Just stuff that seems relatively simple when you view it, but actually we iterated on that design for the better part of 4 months to get to it.
Wow.
And we'll be adding more and more tokens to it very shortly, particularly when we do an integration with the version 2 of the 0x project's protocol.
Okay.
I'm very excited about that.
And so, what are the next things within the product suite for this decentralized bank or open source bank?
Yeah. So the one thing that we incubated is something called Wallet Connect, which is like QR code style login for dApps.
Okay.
And we've spun that out from Balance after it was awarded an Ethereum Foundation grant. We've separated it from Balance, and that's being run by Pedro, this guy who came up with the idea. And so Wallet Connect's really cool. You're going to start seeing this popping up not just in Balance Manager, but in projects like Radar Relay and CryptoKitties and a ton of other dApps. And what this allows you to do is use your mobile wallet, whether it's IAM token or Trust Wallet or any of the other popular Ethereum wallets that live on your phone. And you can just scan a QR code to kind of log into the dApp. And then when you initiate a transaction, say buying a CryptoKitty or making a trade on Radar Relay, a notification is going to pop up on your phone. You can tap on that, and that's going to connect and kind of initiate the transaction with the Ethereum network. And the reason this is good is it's providing an alternative to a Chrome-based or browser-based wallet like MetaMask. If you've ever used WhatsApp on the web, you'll understand the user experience here, where the kind of core app is living on your phone, but you authenticate it on your desktop and you can log in. And so that's actually very close to 1.0, and Pedro is doing a fantastic job there. And this summer, we want to release our take on a mobile wallet for Ethereum and Ethereum-based tokens. And so that'll be the Balance wallet, which will only run on iOS to start with kind of full Wallet Connect support. You'll be able to initially kind of log into Manager on the web using that. But so really what we're doing is laying the kind of usability groundwork. There's not kind of many reasons there why someone would use us over anything else. But this is all of the tools we need to then issue things like loans, offer insurance, offer derivatives, offer much more rich exchange products. This is the kind of set of user experiences we want to offer. So a web-based application, a mobile wallet as the kind of core store of keys, and then Wallet Connect, which links the two. And then we're going to start to offer loads of financial services on top of that. And hopefully we'll have student loans done before the end of the year, ideally in the autumn.
It's funny you should say student loans as well, because it makes me think of a couple of things. I saw you tweet out recently you retweeted something where they'd paid so much off of their debt, or they'd paid so much against their student debt, but hardly paid any actually off. So it's obviously something that's important to you. But also at the same time, conversely, I noticed the other day you were talking about recruiting on Twitter and on AngelList. You just asked 4 questions. You asked 4 questions when they applied for a job. But actually, what was really interesting about that is there's nothing there related to education as well. So I'm kind of getting the sense that you're not the biggest fan of the education system, or the need for higher education, or the need to get in so much debt for certain areas of higher education. Yeah,
I mean, let me be totally clear here about a few things. Is like having dropped out of university after 3 lectures, I've never, ever cared about what credentials someone has. I care much more about the content of their being. Now, with that said, if
where
you're
did you
looking
drop
at
out?
I was at Edinburgh University.
And 3 lectures in, so the first day?
No, I mean, maybe the 5th day, because I missed a bunch of lectures on the first few days, so I don't know.
And what happened?
Well, actually, what happened is I walked into the thing. I was like, do you mind if I stay in halls but drop out? Because there were like, lots of nice people in halls, and I was kind of enjoying it. And they were like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, okay, I really love studying. And then I just didn't go do anything for a year, and I dropped out on the last day.
But so what went wrong? Sorry, before you go into that, because that's really interesting to know.
Well, what went right? Don't you mean? I mean, it's all been right. Like, not all been right.
No, but like, like you obviously went to university with good intentions. What did you go to study?
I was running a clothing company called Hoodieasy, and it sold hoodies and it made it easy. So a really clever name. But basically, if you can imagine, every order I got, my phone buzzed. It was the only thing that let my phone buzz. I'm sat in these lectures and I'm bored to hell already after like 2 lectures, and my phone's going zzz, 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 and I was like, you know what? fuck this studying thing. So it isn't like I dropped out. I dropped into something that I was enjoying more, which is building this website and running this clothing company.
Right. It's funny. I had a similar thing. I dropped out in my second-ish year at uni. I used to write a fanzine when I was a kid, like a music one.
Nice.
And I used to get it printed at my friend's dad's estate agents. We used to print it and just give out concerts. And then I went to uni and I wanted to put it online, and the internet just started, and I learned to code websites. And I was working in a Wetherspoons pub for about £3.50 an hour. And my landlord,
that's it, man.
My landlord had a company, and he said, "Will you build me a website?" And I built it for like £400. So I didn't have to go to work for like 2 weeks. And then there was a recruitment company. It was like £2,500 for a website. And then I got a phone call from one of the very first .coms. They were called eCountries.com. And they see me on a freelancer's board. Bear in mind, I'd been learning to code HTML for like 2 months. And they said, "Can you come and work for us? We've got a contract. I think it was like 3 weeks, but we can only afford to pay you £900 a week." And bear in mind, I was earning £3 an hour as a student. So I took it and I never went back to uni. So it's a similar scenario, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, but then let's take the opposite side of the case there. Is you're a programmer, I'm a programmer, but neither of us sound like we're engineers. Yeah. Now, engineers are people who just are on a different planet when it comes to the thoroughness with which they assess problems, go through them and solve them. And I've really learned the difference. And higher education taught engineers are completely different beasts. Mm-hmm. Usually self-taught programmers are good at hustling, getting stuff done quickly and throwing it together and getting it working. Engineers are good at solving massive intractable problems. And there's very, very different qualities to those types of people. So I don't want to suggest that that higher education has no value. But the problem is that when the government subsidizes all the student debt, you get all the incentives misaligned, where people are incentivized for study for years when they could study for months. They're incentivized to take out loans that are backstopped by society instead of a marketplace. But the problem is that if no student can default on their loans, then you can't have a healthy marketplace for debt. Like, you need to be able to read like which degrees pay you back and which don't. And then those ones are the ones that be supported by higher education. Unfortunately, 3-year degree in photography, it does not result in enough cash flow from a human being to pay off their debts. And so they should default on their loans, and then the market should adjust. A 3-year degree in computer science will more than pay back multiple times, and so the market should adjust. And so the problem with the student debt bubble is just a bunch of mispricing of opportunity and debt. And the reason why I like things like programming courses is it's like a modern day apprenticeship. So you do that hyper intense 3 months with a kind of couple months of study before and a month or so afterwards of finding a job, or a month or two after finding a job. And then you're in an internship, then you're actually learning, and you're not going to be an engineer after 3 months, but you are going to be a competent programmer who can level up over time at a company that wants to invest in you, and you can eventually become an engineer. So and that's true for design. It's true for a whole bunch of things like, project management and all these things, these high skilled jobs that the economy needs. Those things can be kickstarted with a 3-month course that's hyper intense. And there's not enough of that, I think.
So it's interesting. You're not just thinking about open sourcing banking protocols, but you're rethinking the approach to debt and how people might consider debt with education. That's just very interesting.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's like original thought coming from me. This is just lucky experience. I experienced going to a programming course. It completely changed the trajectory of my life. That's where I discovered both Jin, the lady that I work with here at Balance, who's one of the best engineers I've ever worked with, and I discovered Bitcoin. So it completely changed my life. And then last year, I helped a couple kids go through one of these programming courses. And they went from exactly as you were, just serving coffee and having absolutely no hope whatsoever, to kind of living in Portugal and programming by the coast and surfing and traveling the world. They're having a great time. So just seeing these transformations, it's the very definition of everyone talks about upward mobility and these kind of really vague top level concepts. I want to know specifically how many people we've helped just completely right angle their life. And right now it's a few, and hopefully by the end of the year it'll be a couple dozen, and next year it'll be several hundred, and we'll go from there.
Amazing. We did an hour there really quick.
So I'm happy talking some more.
Well, listen,
No problem.
we've got a few people on, so some might want to ask some questions. So before we move on to that, can you just, because this will go out as a podcast, can you let people know how to get hold of you, how to keep an eye on what Balance is doing, who you want to hear from, and why you want to hear from people?
Sure. I mean, the best way is Twitter. I get a lot of idiots email me, but a lot of very smart people DM me. So I really appreciate Twitter. So if you'd like to send me a direct message on Twitter, I stay on top of it all the time. And to the extent that I can help, I will. So it's RICBURTON. I'm not really searching for anyone right now. I have I'm working with all the people that we need. We're always interested in talking to great engineers. Particularly, we're focused on React right now. But if anyone's interested in actually working on the project, if you're technical, then check out our GitHub. It's all open source. And if you're non-technical, then join our community in Spectrum, which is this awesome community tool at spectrum.chat/balance.
Amazing.
And you can see all of the things that we need help on that are non-technical. But unfortunately, no one's been able to help with any of those. So that's it.
Well, I'll share that on the show notes as well. So that's been amazing. Thank you.
Cheers for that.
All right, bud.
What did you make of that? Did you enjoy it? What do you think of Richard? He's a pretty passionate guy, right? He doesn't hold back. He will call a spade a spade. If something's bullshit, he'll tell you, and I like that. I mean, I'm similar. I think maybe it's a British thing. I don't think we like it if we feel somebody's conning us or something's bullshit. So, I really appreciate that, and it was really good to talk to Richard. It was really good to talk through the project he's doing with Balance and try and understand what it is he's creating, and also that it's not just about earning money for him. It's about creating something of value and something of interest, and I think that's really cool. So yes, please follow Richard. Do check him out. Follow him on Twitter. Check out the Balance project, and get in touch with him if you've got any questions. And please do support the show. Please do leave us a review on iTunes. Please follow me on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, pretty much anywhere I am. Please do check out my website, www.whatbitcoindid.com, and please do share this out with your friends and family. My email address is hello@whatbitcoindid.com. If you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch. Outside of that, I'll see you all next week. Okay, bye.